Good morning. And welcome. My name is Reverend Kate Wilkinson, and I am so glad that you are here with us this morning. You braved the torrential downpours of earlier to be here with us, and we are grateful. And we have a few things to celebrate. I can feel there's a little excitement in the air about some recent decisions of the Supreme Court. Who would have thought 10 years ago, or even last week, frankly, that marriage equality would be the law of the land? I know there is still further to go, but I hope you'll join me now in an act of celebration. We need some visuals for this one. So for one, and in addition to these classy rainbow leis that our worship leaders are wearing, you'll find some rainbow-colored streamers in your pews. You'll have to spread them out. They're not in every pew, but right now, let's make sure everyone here has at least one streamer. So share with your neighbors. Does everyone have one? So now's when we get to stand in body or in spirit for a cheer. Please rise. And on the count of 3, we're all going to wave our streamers in the air and shout equality. And James is going to take our picture. And we're going to share this picture with Kathleen Henry, who is in Portland representing us at the UU General Assembly today, and with Michael, who often can't get here in the rain, and with all the other folks who aren't able to be here this morning. But this is a time to be remembered. Oh, shoot, I don't have one. Okay, are we ready? Yes. 1, 2, 3, equality! Woo! Yes! Thank you. Now you may be seated. But we are not done with our celebration, because we also have an opportunity to celebrate some new members joining our community. And this is one of my favorite rituals that we have, and you will find in your order of service a new member welcome ceremony insert, so find that now. And you'll also find pictures and short bios of our fabulous 4 new members. And something else kind of exciting to celebrate is these 4 new members bring us to the 100 member mark at our meeting house. So now I know they couldn't all make it today, but could our new members come forward, and also the members of the membership committee and you'll need your page, so bring your page with you. Here in this meeting house, people have gathered for over a century, seeking a higher purpose and deeper life than they could find alone. We are grateful today for each one of you, that you have found your way here, and that you have decided to make a commitment to this faith community. We hope that as a member of this church, you will allow yourself to know and to be known, to minister to, and to be ministered to love, and to be loved by this congregation.
I affirm my commitment to this congregation and the responsibilities that it entails. I enter this community willing to grow and ready to serve.
congregation. We pledge to be a safe and supportive community that respects who you are and affirms all that you can become. Cry with us, laugh with us, work with us. Together we can seek the highest good. We are glad that you have found in us a home for your spirit.
Spirit of life, we thank you for each small step toward justice and for the giant leap that our country just made toward marriage equality. We thank you for rewarding tiring efforts with sweet victories. We thank you for people who have the courage to stand on the side of love. We thank you for a White House lit up with the colors of the rainbow, and for ministers all over the country providing free weddings to same-sex couples this week. We ask that Spirit be with us in our celebrations, and in gratitude, we take a deep breath of relief and contentment. Spirit of life, in our gratitude, we also ask that our contentment not last long. For there are many more small steps and giant leaps to make. Having tasted the thrill of victory, may we soon grow discontent with lingering inequalities, with racism and poverty, with greed and the devastation of our planet. We thank you for the reminder that our liberation is tied up with the liberation of others, so that we feel deep in our bones that the work is not done. May it continue step by step until one day we can say that all love and all lives truly matter. Amen. Our reading this morning is a poem by Philip Levine, Philosophy Lesson. After driving all night long, I stopped for coffee and eggs at a diner halfway to New York City. The waitress behind the counter looked up from her magazine and said, "Look who's here!" clapped her hands together and broke into a huge smile. "Have I been here before?" I asked. "Beats the heck out of me," she said, and put a glass of cloudy water in front of me. "What'll it be?" One war was closing down in Asia to be followed by another. No longer a kid, I wondered who was I that a gray-haired woman up all night in a roadside hole would greet me like a star. "What do you think of Sartre and the existentialists?" I asked. "We get the eggs fresh from down the road. My old man bakes the bread and sweet rolls. It's all good." It's not often you get the perfect answer to such a profound question. On the way back to the truck, I listened to the pebbles crunching under my wingtips, watched two huge crows watching me from a sad maple, smelled the fishy air blowing in from Lake Erie, and thought, some things are too good to be true. This past week, a group of us from the meeting house was lucky enough to spend the week on Star Island. Star is one of the 9 Isles of Shoals, located 6 miles off the coast of New Hampshire and Maine. Home to the old Oceanic Hotel and a fishing village from the 1600s, a visit to Star Island is like a step back in time. The island has served as a Unitarian retreat center since 1916. UUs from all over the country gather on Star for conferences, family weeks, personal retreats, and day trips. It's a magical place that I know many of you have experienced as well. I have been going to Star Island pretty much every summer since I was a teenager. And after several years away, I was delighted to serve as Minister of the Week for the Arts Conference this week. As always, the island had many things to teach me. And I'm joined in the pulpit by Jane Bunker and Jon Arterton, who also gained insight and clarity from this seemingly magical island. And today we share those island messages with you. I hope that one day all of you will get to experience a week or a few days on Star Island, which Shoalers lovingly call our spirit's home.
Good morning. One of the wonderful evenings at Star is an opportunity to read poetry that you've written, and it's not a requirement, but a number of us did write poems this week, so this was mine. Ode to Star Island with Gratitude. Some say that we are already awake. So for what am I seeking, for heaven's sake? Some say that it's not about doing, but being. So why do I often have trouble just seeing? Well, on Monday, Kate preached from the untethered soul about how our conditioned mind takes a toll. I confess mine had recently been clouding the view, and my body itself had been struggling too. But a while ago, I'd heard of a place called Star, a UU island off of Portsmouth, not far. I thought that their art week might be just the thing to cure my malaise, so I enrolled in the spring. To be honest, when the time of departure grew near, some resistance and apprehension were here. I was cozy at home and with my garden to tend, and my body needed a special diet to mend. But I had signed up, so I had to go. And it helped that I'd heard Reverend Kate loved it so. I'd surely have trouble with 100 new names, but at least I'd know Lisa, John, Mason, and James. So northward from Truro, I dared to roam to learn why this star was folks' spiritual home. And gradually, something began happening to me. On this island, I was feeling more and more free. So what is it about this beautiful place? What is it that puts a smile on each face? Even the roses seem joyful, it's true. And birds choose to nest here, they actually do. Well, there's safety and peace and love all around. And the most gorgeous peonies I've ever found. The rocks and the sea and the buildings so old, all full of stories, such history they've told. The glow from the lanterns that light up our way to the sweetest of chapels where we go to pray symbolizes how Star can remind us what's true by waking us up to all that we knew, that we're not those dark thoughts that clouded our mind, that there really is nothing we need to find. For loving what is much easier here on this special island that all holds so dear. Thank you.
Now, anyone going off to Star Island is warned by everyone who's ever been there. You only get to shower 3 times during the full week. You know the old expression, you don't miss the water till the well runs dry? Well, you don't miss the water until you can only shower on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So the first thing that Star Island taught me was that all the things that I have that I take for granted, how fortunate I am. The next major thing I learned was how frequently I tend to make snap judgments about people, and how frequently those judgments are wrong. At the first chapel service, Kate asked us all to think about what our intention might be for the week. And I, like Jane, decided that my intention would be to try to be and not do. That's a struggle for me sometimes. I was there to lead a workshop called Singing with Courage. This time it was unique. On the first day, Mother Universe came along and gifted me with laryngitis, which I'm still suffering from a little bit. Quite an experience teaching a singing workshop when you can't really even talk. Luckily, I had a microphone to use, and I had James at my side. From time to time, I would lean over and sing the first 2 notes of the song, and he would jump right in and take it away from there. That's another thing Star Island taught me, another bit of sign of how lucky I am to have met James and married the man that I married. There I was, being forced to be quiet, forced to rest, forced to whisper my way through the workshops, forced to cancel a concert James and I were supposed to give. Mother Universe was helping me to keep my intention of being and not doing. I have to say that the week-long workshop turned out to be a most amazing one. There were 26 or 27 people there. There was an immense amount of change and self-realization and heart connection that took place there between us all. And there was an immense amount of love and affection showered on James and myself. There was one woman in the group named Janine whose day-to-day struggles were quite clear to all of us. A survivor of cancer and many other challenges. She rode around in her cart all over the island, taking part in everything, never complaining, always smiling. One night at the poetry reading, Janine closed the evening with 2 short poems that she'd written. The first one was pretty humorous. It was about how people around her should be careful because anything they might do or say could show up in a poem someday. Then she read her second poem. She called it Simply Magic for John and James. There is a simple magic as you whisper in his ear. Just a glance, a wink, a twinkle, and voila, his voice is your voice, your lesson through his mouth. Your silence would be painful, difficult, impossible. But with his care and careful aid, a lesson that was silenced suddenly has voice. Your voice in his mouth, your love in his eyes. A tag team of teaching more than just music. Yes, our time on Star Island was magic.
Thank you, Jane and John and Janine. While I was on the island, I was reading Anne Lamott's latest book, Small Victories, Spotting Improbable Moments of Grace. And I was also experiencing improbable moments of grace and learning all over the place. But my first lesson came from the book itself. Perhaps this passage jumped out at me because we have been talking a lot here at the meeting house about the Garden of Eden lately. We referenced the pain of exile versus the sweetness of belonging, using Buddhist teacher Tara Brach's words. And then we retold the story of the Garden of Eden with Eve as the hero, using my colleague Richard's words. Never one to be too attached to Bible stories, I'm really falling in love with this one. I'm beginning to see our individual understandings of the Garden of Eden as more and more central to our foundational beliefs about the universe and how it operates and where we fit into it all. My love is of deconstructing the story. And this is what Anne Lamott has to say. She writes, "There must have been a book way down there in the slush pile of manuscripts that somehow slipped out of the final draft of the Bible. That would have been the chapter that dealt with how we're supposed to recover from the criticism session in the garden and discover a sense that we're still welcome on the planet." The welcome book, she says, would have taught us that power and signs of status can't save us. That welcome, both offering and receiving, is our source of safety. Various chapters and verses of this book would remind us that we are wanted and even occasionally delighted in, despite the unfortunate truth that we are greedy, grabby, self-referential, indulgent, overly judgmental, and often hysterical. Somehow, Anne laments, that book went missing. Or when the editorial board of bishops pored over the canonical lists from Jerusalem and Alexandria, they arbitrarily nixed the book that states unequivocally that you are wanted, even rejoiced in. We have to write that book ourselves, she says. So lesson number 1, reading Anne Lamott on the front porch in a rocking chair looking out over the harbor. There is a book missing from the Bible. It is the book of welcome. Lesson number 2 came from the dining hall. Now here's some important background information about Star Island. All meals on Star are communal meals served family style. At each meal you sit with 10 people, different every time. It's a great way to get to know lots of different people. But it's also a sort of microcosm of society, because you have to quickly work as a community to help make the meal happen. You have to pass things. And if there's soup, someone needs to ladle it. And you have to share. There are 10 people at the table, so when you take your share of green beans from the communal platter, you kind of have to make note of how many people already have beans and how many are left, and take your share accordingly. One day at lunch, I was struck by the sight of the woman at the head of the table who filled her entire plate with heaps of salad before passing it on to the person next to her. Well, the next 4 people took modest portions, but by the time it reached me, there were only 2 pieces of lettuce and a small slice of apple left in the bowl. I put them on my plate and looked apologetically at the 4 people to my right who were left saladless. Now, it was not a total crisis. There would be other things to pass around, and eventually when the waitry, that's what we call the college kids who serve us, waitry. When the waitry got through with bringing all the dishes to all the tables, there would be an opportunity to ask for more salad. But for 15 minutes or so, this one woman thoroughly enjoyed her big plate of salad while 4 people sat with empty plates, waiting patiently, hoping for the possibility of their share, but not assured of it. And so you can learn a lot at a lunch table on Star Island that also applies to the larger world. To live peacefully with so many other people in this life, the right thing to do is not really to take as much as you want, but actually to just take as much as you need and pass on the rest so that everyone can hopefully have some. Some of us have the privilege of sitting at the head of the table. And when things are handed to us in abundance, we have a choice to make. It's tempting, in the face of all that abundance, to fill our plates with salad. And in a perfect world, we would all be able to do that. But since God serves us family style also, we need to share and make sure that each person gets a little bit and hope that there will be more. There usually is. I also learned a lot just walking around the island on my way to things. That's where lesson number 3 comes from. It's about how small disputes are settled on the island. You see, even in that idyllic setting, problems and annoyances do arise, but people seem to handle them differently. They are a little more spacious with each other, have a little more patience. One day I was walking along the boardwalk, which has a line of small bedroom units along it, and I noticed some handwritten notes taped to several door handles. I read them. "Please close your doors more quietly," they said. Well, that's a nice way to handle that, I thought to myself. I mean, I might have just waited to run into my neighbors and mention it to them in person, but maybe they were like ships passing in the night and really didn't know who their neighbors were. There was a dispute like this once at the building I lived in during college. We all parked in a line off the long dirt driveway, and many of us found it easier to park our cars at an angle. But some felt that we would fit more cars if we parked perpendicular. I remember going out to my car one morning to find a note on my windshield, much like the notes taped to the door handles, except this note had a string of expletives in it. It's probably a good thing that I didn't know which car belonged to the author of the note. But on Star Island, things are kinder. And later that day, as I was walking back to the parsonage, I saw that those notes had been taken down, and a new note was on one of the door handles. I read it. "Terribly sorry," it read. "We are having trouble with the door latch." Now, this interaction didn't exactly solve the loud door closing problem, but I imagine that it solved a great deal anyway. Because the next time the author of the first note was woken up by the apparent slamming of a door. He or she probably didn't think, "Those jerks are slamming the door again," but rather, "Oh dear, I hope we can get that latch fixed soon." And that is a much nicer thought to have when you are awakened from a dream. Sometimes just assuming good intent is all that we need to minimize the impact. My last lesson was bittersweet. One woman on the island had just lost her mother. She is Jewish, so she had been observing Shiva for 7 days after her mother's burial. She observed most of the week with her family in New York, but for the last few days, she came to Star Island to sit Shiva with her other family, the Arts Conference. In the Jewish tradition, she explained to us, you observe Shiva for 7 days, abstaining from drinking and dancing and working. Instead, you sit around and tell stories about the person who has died. You cry and laugh and cry some more. People bring you food, and you cry and laugh with them. And when the 7 days are done, you take a walk around the neighborhood. In her interpretation of this tradition, you are showing the world and your neighbors that you are ready to be with them again. You are not done grieving, of course, but you are ready to be of the world instead of apart from the world in your grieving. Another interpretation of the walk is that the spirit of the person who has just died has been sitting with you, and taking the walk is how you release them. So on the last day of Shiva, she invited those of us who wanted to walk around the neighborhood with her, which in this case, of course, was the island. And a group of at least a dozen of us took her up on this invitation to honor her mother in this way. Even some people who didn't even know her. As we walked, we took turns holding her hands, so that by the time we made it around the island, she had spent a little time holding hands with each of us. It also meant that she never had to walk alone. Some of us asked her questions about her mother when it was our turn to hold her hand. Some of us walked in silence. All of us loved her. And so it came full circle for me on that walk around the island, watching strangers and friends hold a grieving woman's hand. The welcome book would have taught us that welcome, both offering and receiving, is our source of safety. Various chapters and verses of this book would remind us that we are wanted and even occasionally delighted in. We have to write that book ourselves. Amen, and blessed be.